So Tyler and I, as we were getting ready for this lesson, we're talking about the amazing bookends. In fact, actually, Tyler used the phrase bookends that we have in the Book of Mormon. Let's begin with, I'll take the green. 1 Nephi 1, verse 20. And then Moroni, chapter 10, verses 3 through 5. Okay? I like to call this Nephi's thesis statement, or his main testimony. He has actually a pretty robust testimony. This says, "Behold, I will show unto you the tender mercies of the Lord are over all those whom he hath chosen, because of their faith, to make them mighty even unto the power of deliverance." So why is Nephi writing? He wants to give us evidence of God's tender mercies. And then if we go to Moroni 10, 3 to 5, "Behold, I would exhort you that when you read these things," okay, so this is the famous promise that missionaries often share with people who are seeking greater light and truth. And we actually so often focus on verses 4 and 5 that we can feel the Spirit teaching us truth. We often miss the homework assignment that Moroni gives us in verse 3. "I would exhort you that when you read these things, the Book of Mormon, everything that Nephi and others wrote, if it is wisdom in God, that you should read them. And if you have them, just know that God is wise. That you should remember how merciful the Lord hath been unto the children of men." Okay, so that's your assignment. You need to remember how merciful the Lord has been. Okay, there's a timeline. You need to go review every act of mercy that God has ever done in the world, from the creation of Adam, even down to the very moment that you are receiving these things and pondering them in your hearts. Now, I don't know anybody who's actually fully accomplished Moroni's homework assignment. I'm not sure there's enough hours in a lifetime to record and remember every single act of mercy God has ever done. But that is the bookend to the Book of Mormon. Remember God's mercy. And what's interesting here is in Alma 33, which is almost at the center spot of the Book of Mormon, you have mercy, the deep focus from this ancient prophet Zenos, where he is focusing in that the gospel is all about God's mercy. And let me tie this into covenants very briefly. We've talked about the Abrahamic covenant and the Mosaic covenant. The Abrahamic covenant is what God promises to do for us. Let's just call it God's actions. And the Mosaic covenant could be summarized as what God asks us to do in the relationship. Our actions. And there's a mutuality in the covenant, right? God acts on our behalf and he expects us to respond. And the mercy, we could actually say that the Abrahamic covenant is a symbol of God's mercy, that God's actions are always about mercy, even in the justice. So if we think back to what Nephi says, the tender mercies of the Lord are over all those whom he hath chosen because of their faith, their actions, to make them mighty even unto the power of deliverance, God's actions to deliver us. So as a lens for understanding the gospel, if we think about the Abrahamic covenant, God's promises and actions to provide us salvation, and the Mosaic covenant, which has been updated by Jesus with the higher law and ongoing prophecy, is our actions to show faith. And this mercy encompasses all of this. And that's what we're hearing in this message in the book of Alma, that as we act on faith, we always can get access to God's mercy. Again, verse 5 of Alma 33, "Thou wast merciful unto me when I did cry unto thee in my field." So the action was I cried unto God, and I got from the Abrahamic covenant mercy. Actually, God gave the mercy. Verse 8, "Thou art merciful unto thy children when they cry unto thee, to be heard of thee and not of men." Verse 9, "Thou hast been merciful unto me and heard my cries." And what's very interesting is, and I don't want to minimize this, but how much effort is going on here? It's simply prayer. Now, there are many other things we can do to get access to God's mercy, but how hard is it to pray? Like, you can be praying at any moment, wherever you are, you can have a prayer to God and you can experience His mercy. Now, there are many other things to do in this life that we cannot get access to God's mercy, but just know that through prayer, we can have ongoing, continuous access to God's mercy, and that actually is the promise that we get at sacrament.